Good morning, and welcome to Behind the Screen. I am Jam. This is the show where we hang out and talk about games, board games, card games, role-playing games, mainly role-playing games, and we talk about things that are beautiful, true, and good in an attempt to see what makes us better gamers, game masters, and humans. It is good to be here with all of you. I'm still getting used to the new Iconic studio as we have switched things over from StreamYard to Streamlabs to StreamYard. Good morning to John and Tink and Mark and Padre and Akantagu. Welcome. So before we get started, I have an announcement to make. A winner of our first Other Worlds Than These contest. I don't know. It's a contest or just event that we're participating in. And this one goes out to, I'm glad that they're in the chat today. Padre, you randomly won off the post that we've been making over the last 2 weeks. I will be contacting you to send you out a one of 3 prizes for you to choose from. One of which is the Blade Runner starter box, and then there's a couple of other games you can pick from. If you guys want to know what that is, the Other Worlds Than These is every 2 weeks I'm going to be giving away prizes from my bookshelf, things that I've done reviews on, things that I've purchased, things that have been sent to me. And the goal here is on the Iconic Discord server, which you can get as a member of the Iconic patronage or as a member of the YouTube channel, you get access to the Discord, and every 2-3 times a week I post a prompt designed to get us to engage and talk about something fun, the ability to focus on something fun and beautiful in the midst of, well, everything else going on social media. And every 2 weeks we're going to give away a prize to anyone who has been put in the posted in the chat. If you post, I put you into a randomizer, and then it spits out the name of of who won the prize. Padre, congratulations! I'll reach out on Discord after this chat. The next 2 weeks, we're going to have the first post posted, or the first prompt posted this afternoon, and that prize is actually coming from Palladium Books. A lot of P alliteration in this episode of Iconic production behind the screen. But yes, Kevin over at Palladium Books loves this idea and said, hey, I want to take the next prize slot. So if you respond to any of the prompts with actual text, not with an emoji, if you respond with actual text to any of the prompts that we post over the next 2 weeks, your name will be put in the randomizer, and that randomizer will spit out the winner, and the winner will get a care package from Kevin Simbita over at Palladium Books. Ben, good to see you this morning, buddy. So that's it. Other Worlds, just trying to bring some light and joy and enjoyment to the Iconic production subscribers, and put a little bit more positivity out in the into social media. That's my goal. Ooh, Ross, good to see you. Always got to show up for Supers. Well, today is not Supers. Today is about Heroism, which I guess is Supers adjacent. And Chris, good to see you. Oh man, we got a great group of people here for this. So we're going to talk about Heroism today. And Ben, wait, Ben, because I am going to. We're going to talk about Heroism. And this idea came to me as I was reading through the DC Comics Guide to Writing Comics. And what Denny O'Neil, who is one of my favorite Batman authors, was a great editor of Batman right after Archie Goodwin, and produced some of the best Batman stories under his tenure in all of Batman history. He defines a hero in that book as anyone who is willing to sacrifice of themselves on behalf of others. And it got me thinking. I was like, well, how would I define the hero? Does that work? Does that merge with my definition of heroism? And as I was thinking about it, right, that's why we get drawn to superheroes. But also, and I think most importantly, especially for this channel. That's why we get drawn into gaming. Good morning to Black Lodge Games. Always good to see you guys. We're going to have another Beyond the Table with Black Lodge Games, guys. Talk about Vampire the Masquerade, a little bit more Glorantha, and their upcoming setting Bloodmore, which I'm very excited to chat about. Tink, no, this does not count as responding to a prompt. I appreciate the attempt. An attempt was made. We'll say there. So, you were the kid with the writing comics book. I had the How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. Yeah, that's fair. Stan Lee wrote the intro to Danny O'Neill's book. So, what does that mean for gaming? Well, I think in the modern world and the postmodern world, the definition of hero has been replaced with a myriad of fractured and lesser ideals. I blame a lot of this on, I'll say it, on Alan Moore's kind of seminal work, The Watchmen. The idea that not only should heroes be flawed, but we can break them down and we can show how essentially worthless and human they are. And I think what most people fail to see about Watchmen is that Moore attempts to rebuild the heroes after deconstructing them. But we now live in a world which we're going to stay on the superhero theme specifically for Ben, filled with people who just want to watch the world burn. We are filled with people who love to deconstruct things and then leave all of their pieces on the floor and then walk away and leave you to clean up the mess. It's akin to that kid who would come over to your house, trash all of your Legos, and then leave you with the mess to clean up. We don't have a consistent story of heroism that we can go to. I think the MCU started off strong. We saw Iron Man and Thor and Cap rising to the occasion with their flaws, with their interpersonal conflicts. And then we got into this deconstruction phase where it's like, well, how many times do I have to see Thor go through the same cycle? Thor still doesn't know who he is after finding himself 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. This idea of deconstructionism as the end goal, not as a way to view the heroes and see them from a different angle. Say, hey, we take this for granted in heroes. Should we take this for granted? Or is this something that's worthwhile once we pull it apart? Can we put it back together? We've lost that. We've lost the ability to do that. I think there are some writers who are very keenly aware of this. I think Erickson and Esselmont in the Malazan series does a very good job of this. They deconstruct epic fantasy for the purposes of rebuilding it and pointing us toward compassion. That's beautiful. We see in comics, if you are a big fan of comic books, we see guys like Scott Snyder deconstructing the Batman mythos and rebuilding it up multiple times in multiple different ways to examine this hero from a variety of different angles. And that's what I want to talk about. We don't have to be passive consumers of our hero story. I think that's why fantasy gaming holds so much of a sway over the industry. Because fantasy gaming at its core is about being heroic. Even, I don't mean altruistic, Conan is a heroic figure, but falls further away on the altruism scale than, say, like Aragorn would. Conan, for all of his barbarism and sword and savagery and sorcery, still does the right thing. He still sacrifices of himself for others. Now, granted, that's usually after he's gotten into this mess because he's in it for himself. But at the core, that's what we're doing in gaming. If you want to see an amazing video kind of highlighting this, I would argue you should go check out Black Lodge's game's speed run of Acts 2, The Sinister Stone of Saqqara, using a lot of Alexander's abstraction rules that has been very entertaining to watch. The first video dropped. Please keep making videos like that. guys over at Black Lodge Games. So what is it about fantasy role-playing game that pulls us into this idea of heroism? All right. In a basic fantasy game, not basic fantasy game trademark, swords, yes, Crypt, right? A lot of people boil down the dungeon to go into the dungeon, kill the people, and take their stuff. And some people would like to have you reskin that as some sort of awful or horrendous action that you should not be engaged with. They want to bring, very banal and very milquetoast ideals into gaming, right? Like, oh, we should be living all in a happy society where everything is great. I would love to live in that world. That's not the world that I live in. And as we've stated before, fairy stories are important not because they tell us that dragons exist, but they tell us that dragons can be killed. Going into the dungeon, taking the stuff that you find in there from creatures of evil and bringing it back to civilization is inherently, while it may be a selfish motivation for your characters, overall, in the vast scheme of things, you are pushing back chaos. You are driving chaos further away from the bastions of civilization and light. That is a heroic action. And there's something in our souls as humans, as gamers, as people of a modern age that craves that heroic journey. And yes, I use the term heroic journey as Campbell would have used it. Craves that the conflict that refines us and makes us better, but is not done for a completely selfish or amoral reason. You're doing it as a sacrifice on behalf of others. In jackals, that's why jackals are described the way they are. They go out into the wilderness to push back the darkness. And if they don't do that, then the little points of light that exist on the Zaharets are going to be completely overwhelmed and swarmed and devoured by the Takan. Now, JM, you may be saying, I see how this applies to superheroes, but what about horror games like Call of Cthulhu or Vampire? Let's take a look at the chat and we'll come back to that. The Vampire guys, yes. Okay, John Doom. Yes, some of the DC Comics villainous names are a little on the nose, but at least fewer of them suffer from Stan Lee's alliteration fetish than Marvel characters. Peter Parker, J. Jonah Jameson, Fing Fang Foom, Reed Richards, Matt Murdock. I could go on, and I probably will later. Tinker has doubled down on her typable emotion. If the definition is self-sacrifice for the greater good, they can still be flawed. They just have to maintain selfishness. Yes. Here's the thing. Flawed heroes are amazing. Batman's quest for vengeance versus his desire for justice. Peter Parker's, in the early ones, his shyness and his inability to balance the two halves of his life. Tony Stark's, blatant, self-serving, self-destructive nature that when confronted, that's the thing, heroes try to overcome their flaws. Heroes don't sit around and argue for them. And I think that's the key difference. And I think that's what we crave from heroes in our modern world. I think in our modern world, very often we are told to argue for our limitations, to settle for our flaws. We are no longer given inspiration to overcome our own limitations. And I think that's why gaming appeals to us. The heroism of picking up a sword and standing against the darkness. The heroism of putting your mask on for the first time and going out to fight who knows what. The fact that so many campaigns are built around stopping a big, bad, evil guy. We want that. We crave that. We crave on some level. Even if with our lips we profess moral relativism, on some level we crave good triumphing over evil. And if we want that, we have to understand on some level there is good, there is evil, there is right, there is wrong. Jam is a river to his people, and you are the people. That's fair. That's 100% fair. Part of my struggle with deconstruction is that often we are presenting the deconstructed tales without people being familiar with the original stories. Yes, I actually think that's one of the problems with Zack Snyder's Watchmen. I love The Watchmen. I'm one of those guys who watches the 4.5-hour supercut where Tales of the Dread Freighter are like kind of interspersed in all the deleted scenes. But when it came out, the renaissance of the superhero genre wasn't a decade old. I don't know that most people had the breadth of understanding to understand the deconstruction or what was attempting to go on. And if you remove that understanding, if you remove that background, if you remove any attempt to put something back together better than the way you found it, C.S. Lewis says, in order to criticize something, you have to love it first. You are again left with somebody who enjoys tearing things apart, cackling over the corpse, and then walking away. And that is a very nihilistic view of heroes in the world. Zeroism is my favorite non-subject as well, Cryptrite. Cryptrite is a necromancer at heart. Reduce, reuse, recycle. That's Cryptrite's model. The dragon isn't misunderstood, Mark. The dragon is sitting on a hoard as a symbol for greed and the overwhelming power of our lust for safety and riches. I see this in fairy tales, Padre. Yes, we see a reaction to Three Little Pigs where the pigs are presented as bad compared to the good wolf. But that only... Right. The story of Wicked, the story, not talking about the latest movie, the story of Wicked works because we are so familiar with the story of the Wizard of Oz. I think that familiarity has left most of the public knowledge, and we are left now with copies of copies of copies, and instead of the pure bold lines and colors of the original myths and stories that we are trying to share and retell and emulate, we are left with these faded pictures that we're trying to squint at and understand, why does this mean anything to me? I think that and I've talked with these guys. I worked with at least one of them. But I think the design team of third edition D&D did a disservice to us as gamers by making Dungeons & Dragons self-referential on purpose in third edition. They felt that Dungeons & Dragons had grown large enough that it didn't need to be referencing Appendix N, Conan, the myths and legends that it was founded on. Which is why when people rediscovered Appendix N, it was this like light bulb. It was part of the OSR. It was part of the BroSR. It was this rediscovery of fire. When if you read the first edition book or the second edition book, which is where I came in, it's like, hey, if you want to play a warrior like Gilgamesh or Enkidu or Hiawatha, play a fighter. If you want to be someone like Charlemagne or Lancelot or Arthur, play a paladin. And they gave us these references, and we understood inherently who they were talking about because we were so much more connected, but also we didn't see this thing as its own self-referential nonsense. The epitome of this self-referential nonsense for me is, and the example of everything I'm talking about, again, I'm going to lean into comics a little bit because with New Helios City, that's on my mind. One of the recent runs of Captain America, where someone was so in their own self-referential comic bubble that they were like, we're going to make Cap always have been a member of Hydra. Which completely misses the point of the character. It completely misses the origin of the character, where Hydra was a stand-in for Nazis after World War II, and Cap was written by a couple of Jewish guys who were trying to inspire people to fight against this. So to have Cap become a Nazi is deconstruction at its worst. and I hated it. Homelander's need for milk. Let's not talk about that. Yes, Praetorian Panzer, Boromir, and Stern Brightblade are where you tend to gravitate towards characters when you tend to play. Yeah, that Watchmen cut is great, isn't it? But who watches you when you watch the Watchmen cut? That's amazing. Paladin like Roland. Yeah, the bard is behind him singing the song of Roland. That's amazing. Okay, so what do we do with games that have a more non-heroic bent, or at least on the surface? Games like Call of Cthulhu, which I would argue is one of the most heroic role-playing games you can actually engage with. In Dungeons and Dragons and Axe, even in like OSR games like Axe or Hyperborea, where you have very limited hit points, it still comes from a heroic standpoint. But you are, in general, tougher than most of the monsters you face, right? You have this understanding that most of you, unless things go horribly wrong, are going to push through. Call of Cthulhu is the opposite. Call of Cthulhu says, I am willing to sacrifice not only my life, but my sanity, knowing that in playing this adventure, I am almost 100% guaranteed to go crazy and die, or go crazy and then die, and then maybe come back to life again and then die again. And yet, the people I love and the world will get to continue on for a couple more generations. And maybe the next time the Elder Gods threaten, someone can step up and do the same thing that I did. Games of personal horror, however, are a little bit more difficult. And I would argue that most games of Vampire the Masquerade that I've seen run, Vampire, Werewolf, Changeling, the way I run Mage, maybe not the way I run Mage. I'm going to make myself the exception to the rule. None of you have played in my Mage game, so you don't know if I'm lying or not. Actually, Tink has played in part of a Mage game that I ran. Most often I saw Vampire games descend into games of parasitic heroism. Well, I only drink the blood of the wicked and so that I can power my abilities to go out and wage war in the night for righteousness. I think you kind of miss something about the whole personal horror political drama of Vampire if that's the way you lean into it. But I understand the impulse. And I understand at the time, like rebelling against the dungeon and rebelling against Dungeons and Dragons was part of the draw of the storyteller system. Look, it's mature. Look, it's horror. Look, it's not based around what we saw as kind of casual acts of heroism or murder hoboism if you were being very cynical. And yet, more often than not, those games became about overcoming your own personal horror to do something better, whether it's just for vampire kind or for all of humanity. Helsing wants a word. Yeah, Kryptonite, if you leave the game while you're on top, always a good call. Okay, Cat being a member of Hydra is like when they hired a director who has never, seen or read the original source. I have heard from the guy who was the lead showrunner on X-Men 97 that sadly that is the direction Marvel had gone for a while, that most producers were showing up having never read the source material and relegating that to like an assistant producer or an assistant to the assistant producer. Tink, I think watching Watchmen once is totally worth it. If you like visual storytelling, say what you want about Snyder, and I do acknowledge the man has a lot of flaws in the way he approaches movies, but he understands that movies are a visual medium, and he leans into that heavily. Yes, Rorschach seeing things as black and white, no gray or moral ambiguity. Justify hating those who definitely fell outside of his moral code. And I would argue that it's interesting to me that so many people love Rorschach when Alan Moore specifically stated he went out, he hates Batman, he thinks Batman's the worst. And so he was trying to present how he saw Batman and hated the fact that everyone loved the character that he wrote specifically to be hated. The TV show was not, and I could go off on a tear about that. But again, my goal is not to tear things down, but to build things up. We can have that discussion some other time. Padre had a game where 5th Gen's vampire had more humanity than the Ooh, the original Grifter from by Jim Lee in the Wildstorm universe. All right, Padre, you would have won this week's challenge had you not just won last week's challenge for that. Rorschach is great. I just wish he didn't have a picture of my parents fighting on his mask. Oh man, it was anyway. I will say, we'll just end this. One of the really interesting comics that came out in like the last 5 years, which I think addresses this, was Doomsday Clock by Jeff Johns. Doomsday Clock was an attempt to bring the Watchmen into the DC universe. It was an attempt, like the main DC continuity. It was an attempt to address some of the same things that the Watchmen had done, 40 years earlier. It was an attempt to resolve some of the issues coming out of the New 52 and into Rebirth, how it went much darker than they had hoped, and trying to bring back some light. And this is a spoiler in case you guys want to go out and read Doomsday Clock. But essentially the idea is that the Watchmen have come to the DC universe. Dr. Manhattan is behind all of the evil things that have happened from Flashpoint on. And it fails in some ways. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say it's perfect. It does fail in some ways. I don't know that the Watchmen needed to be brought into the DC universe, nor do I think that necessarily it was the most skillfully done. I love Jeff Johns. I love Jeff Johns as a writer. But the ending of the story, I think, ties back to our theme of heroism well. And it talks about how Doc Manhattan arrived on Earth in like 1937. In 1939, Superman landed. Release of Action Comics. And then basically he noticed every 10 to 15 to 20 years, the universe rewrote itself and Superman landed in Kansas again. And then 15 to 20 years later, the world rewrote itself and Superman landed in. And so he started messing with the timeline to see how much could he mess with Superman's story before the universe collapsed. Because, right, from Superman, the Age of Heroes is launched, and like the Justice Society kind of exists to prop up Superman. And the Legion of Superheroes comes back to talk to Superman. And so like the past and the future all rotate through Superman. And in the end, Superman inspires Dr. Manhattan to go back and save the Watchmen universe. He resets the continuity. The Justice Society and the Legion of Superheroes are restored to us. And Dr. Manhattan comes to the conclusion that in order for Superman is so important that every generation has to retell the story of a baby being sent from a doomed planet to be raised by farmers to become the champion that we all know Superman to be. That it's cyclical. We have to keep retelling the story. Now, if you are involved in a liturgical tradition, you understand this on a like more religious level, because that's what we do week in, week out. The same week of the liturgy is the same week of the liturgy next year, is the same week of the liturgy the year after that. The seasons come and go, the seasons of fasting and feasting. The holidays come back. And I think at its core, that's why heroic role-playing games will never go away, and why we need it now more than ever. We need to retell the story of entering into the darkness and pushing it back, lest civilization be overrun. There's a lot of darkness out in the world these days. Hopefully, you, as Ben said, can be a river to your people, your group and community. Your games can help be a reminder that the darkness doesn't have to win. We don't have to let it passively roll over us. And heroes are the ones who give up themselves to bring the light to those around them. So that's it for today. That is the end of this Behind the Screen. Thank you all for joining me. I will be back on Thursday to talk about another set of factions for our New Helios City group. I gotta say, the Super Marches has captured a lot of people's imagination, like it has mine. We've got a huge forum on the Discord server. If you want to join the Iconic Patreon, you can jump over and get access to that, talk with all of the cool people who show up here, and participate in helping design it. I think sometime in October, we'll have enough material that I'm going to go through and put together the first draft of our Super Marches document, because the goal is January 1 to actually start running some of this stuff. The other announcement that I have to make is I'm in the process, again, thanks to the Super Marches discussion, of putting together some discrete 1 to 2 minute videos like I did for Pinnacle with First Bites, explaining Ascendant, breaking down each part of the rule system, character creation, but in like small, highly edited videos that I can just post on the Iconic YouTube channel. So to everyone who joined, thank you so much. Cripright, good to see you. Padre, John Doom, Ben, Chris, Mark, Tink, and I know I'm missing some people, but can't scroll all the way up. It's a lot of scrolling. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. I am JM. This has been Behind the Screen, and I will see you guys all on Thursday. Till then, have a good one, everyone.